Hey guys! Tonight we journey through moonlit forests where the scent of crushed laurel and damp pine needles lingers in the air. You'll follow silent footsteps across the silver sands of Delos where gods once drew breath. Tonight you walk with Artemis the moon, goddess huntress of the wild and protector of women as she faces a choice no immortal ever expects to make. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step lightly onto the island of Delos, where the tide washes soft foam against the rocks and even the sea seems to whisper in reverence. The moon overhead isn't just bright, it's watchful. And tonight it feels like it's watching you. You've heard the stories, of course. Everyone has. But this time you aren't reading a myth. You're walking in it. The breeze carries salt and thyme. Somewhere a goat bleats in the distance, unimpressed by your presence. Welcome to the birthplace of twin divinity. The ground under your feet is sacred. Not in the overgrown temple way. No, it's humming, softly, as if it remembers. It was here that Leto, pregnant, barefoot and exhausted, wandered in desperation. Here a queen of the gods and expert in holding grudges had forbidden every land and isle from giving Leto refuge. No one dared defy her, no one, except Delos. A floating island, rootless, unstable, hiding in the margins of Olympus's maps. The underdog of geography, Delos said yes. Leto fell beneath an olive tree, clutched its twisted roots and gave birth to twins. First came Artemis, slippery with birth and already serious. No infant cries, no trembling lip, just wide, pale eyes staring like she'd already seen what the world had to offer. Apollo followed minutes later, golden and screaming, of course, and here's where it gets weird. According to a lesser-known fragment by Callimachus, Artemis helped deliver her own twin brother, like midwifed him. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic or literal. I mean, delivering your twin as a newborn, that's some resume builder. Either way, she was born first, and that mattered. The olive tree's still here, by the way. You pass it now, locals claim its leaves whisper at night, especially under a full moon. Superstition. Maybe. But as you brush your hand across its bark, something cold and ancient seems to curl around your fingers. You walk on. The ruins of a once majestic temple rise ahead, pillars broken, time-stained but defiant. This was where the first hymns to Artemis were sung. Not the grand temple of Ephesus, not yet. This was humble. This was raw. Worship before architecture. You pause. The moon overhead feels larger now, as if leaning in. The island's rocks glow faintly under her gaze, like bone under skin. A lizard darts across your path, spooked maybe, or maybe reverent. The night air thickens with memory. You hear rustling, no wind, just memory. Something's replaying here. You listen, and slowly the past overlays the present like fog. There she is, a young girl with dark curls and bare feet walking ahead of you, cradling a small carved bow. Her tunic is cinched with braided hemp. She glances back, not at you, through you, and then she's gone. A flicker of silver between two olive trees. You blink. That wasn't imagination, that was memory. This place remembers her. The moonlight shifts, and for a moment you catch a gleam of something in the distance, a stag's eye maybe, or just a trick of light. You walk toward it anyway. You find a small stone carved with her name, Artemis. No fanfare. Just 3 letters worn smooth by wind and worship. Someone left a handful of rosemary beside it, and a coin. You wonder who still believes enough to make an offering. Quirky fact in Roman times, soldiers heading into dangerous campaigns would sometimes pray to Artemis not for victory but for a swift, clean death if things went south. Better her arrow than a Roman spear, I guess. You sit beside the stone, the moon's climbing, the tide's retreating, and you begin to understand this isn't just mythology. This is a memory the earth insists on telling. And tonight, it starts with you. You awaken, though you never quite fell asleep, still seated beneath that whispering olive tree. Something ancient has stirred, and now the ground beneath your feet feels less like dirt and more like parchment inked with stories. Your fingers brush the earth beside you, and it's warm. Not sun warm, birth warm, like the first breath of something divine. You stand and begin to walk inland, the leaves crunching faintly beneath your sandals if you're wearing any. This is Artemis's world now, and footwear is optional. You move through the dappled shadows until you reach a clearing where the moon hangs low and bloated, pale as bone. It lights the whole scene like a stage, the birth of a goddess, wild and wordless. The story goes that after Artemis and Apollo were born, something inside Artemis shifted. She wanted nothing to do with Olympus's vanity parades, Hera's gossip, hard pass, Dionysus's parties. She'd rather eat gravel. Instead, she marched straight to her father Zeus, the king of gods and mediocre husband, and made a list. 10 things, not toys, not tiaras, requests. First on that list, eternal virginity. Artemis had no interest in marriage lovers or the drama that came with celestial entanglements. Second, a silver bow and arrows crafted by Hephaestus himself. Stylish, sure, but deadly. Her weapons would be moon-forged, silent and precise. Third, hunting dogs. Not just any dogs, immortal ones, gifted with the nose of wolves and the speed of storms. Fourth, a dozen mountain nymphs to be her companions. Wild girls with pine sap in their veins and mischief behind their teeth. And fifth, this one always gets overlooked, freedom from Olympus. She wanted the forests, the wild places, the quiet paths where no prayers reached, where a goddess could breathe without expectation. Historians still argue whether this list of 10 is apocryphal or lost in older oral tradition. But one tablet fragment from Delos dated around the 6th century BCE does mention Artemis's gifts chosen upon youth. So who knows, maybe it wasn't just mythic PR. Zeus surprisingly said yes to everything, whether out of guilt, admiration, or because he genuinely feared being on her bad side, unclear. So armed with silver and willpower, Artemis left Olympus. You walk now in her footsteps, through pine forests where the needles hush the sound of your steps, past streams so still they look like fallen sky, over moss-slick stones that once felt the tread of divine feet. You see her again, this time older, maybe 12, maybe eternal. Her bow hangs over her shoulder like a promise. Her eyes scan the underbrush. Beside her runs a lean white dog with ears like leaves and a name you can't pronounce. She pauses, senses something, then smiles. There's a moment when Artemis sees her first deer. Not the kind etched in temple mosaics, this one's real. Antlers still velveted, breathing mist, and she doesn't shoot, not yet. She watches, studies, learns. It's one of the first truths of the hunt. Waiting is power. You follow as she does. Hours pass. Or maybe centuries. Time in her forests bends like willow branches. Eventually she draws, not in anger, not in haste, but with reverence. Her first arrow flies not into flesh but into bark. A warning shot, a line drawn. This is her domain now. Fun aside, in ancient Attica, hunters would whisper prayers to Artemis before firing, not to hit, but to miss cleanly if they weren't worthy. She wasn't a goddess of killing, she was a goddess of permission. The night deepens. Stars spill overhead like scattered grain. And still you follow. Artemis kneels beside a stream, now washing her hands in moonlight. Around her, nymphs begin to gather girls with tangled hair and laughter like birdsong. They greet her not with bows, but with elbow nudges and teasing. They've all taken the same vow. Sisterhood without marriage, wildness without shame. They strip and dive into the water, no modesty here. Just joy. Artemis laughs, a real laugh, not the cool smirk statues give her. You never hear that laugh in temples, only here. A nymph paddles past you, winks, you coming in. You decline politely. It's her world, not yours. You're just here to remember, and yet you feel something stir. A calm, like the air before snow, like memory before sleep. Artemis rises from the stream glistening. The moon blesses her in silence. Tonight she isn't a symbol, she isn't a statue, she's a girl, a sister, a sovereign of solitude, and you are lucky just to walk beside her. You follow her through the underbrush branches, brushing your arms like whispers, leaves crunching like secrets. The forest has a pulse now, a rhythm to its stillness. Every rustle, every shift of twig or paw feels like a conversation. You are not alone here. You're in Artemis's realm, and everything is watching back. She walks ahead of you, sure-footed, silent. The silver bow rests across her back, but she doesn't reach for it yet. Instead, she listens. Not with her ears, but with her whole body. That kind of listening takes years. Or in her case, perhaps it was always there. Ahead, you spot movement. Not dramatic, just the faintest shiver of ferns, a rabbit, a bird, but Artemis already knows. She lowers her body to the ground and you follow, trying very hard not to sound like a sack of olives falling down a hill. There it is. A young buck, no older than a season, steps into the moonlight. His legs wobble slightly. He's new to this world, still learning which shadows to trust. You can almost hear Artemis exhale, not from nerves, but reverence. Then she draws her bow. It's a fluid motion like water becoming ice. No strain, no drama, just purpose, and then snap. The bowstring hums, the arrow whistles, and the deer vanishes into the brush. Missed. You turn to Artemis, expecting frustration. Instead, she's smiling. That was never meant to hit. That was a test for the deer and for herself. A reminder, just because you can doesn't mean you must. A popular vase fragment from the 5th century BCE shows Artemis not in mid-hunt, but lowering her bow. Scholars used to dismiss it as unfinished. But lately, there's a growing theory it was deliberate, a moment of restraint, a mythic shrug. You keep walking. Soon you come upon a glade bathed in silver, and there, half hidden among the roots, lies a bundle wrapped in old wool. Artemis stops. You expect a trap, maybe a cursed relic. But no, it's a bow, not hers. This one is carved from ash wood, strung with horsehair, and etched with crude designs, birds, suns, and what might be an eel. Not exactly Olympian craftsmanship. She picks it up. Beside it, a set of footprints, small, barefoot, urgent, disappear into the trees. A mortal's gift, a tribute. Maybe just a child pretending to be divine. But Artemis cradles the bow like it matters. And now you're moving again. Through thornbrush and damp grass, past mossy stones that hum faint lullabies. She's chasing something now, though she'd never call it chasing. It's a pull, a curiosity. The scent of time thickens in the air, and then a figure. A girl, no older than 14, stands trembling beside a tree. She's dressed in goat hide, a homemade quiver dangles from her hip. She sees Artemis and immediately drops to her knees, muttering apologies in broken Greek. Turns out she's from a nearby village. They told her if she wanted to escape marriage to run to the forest and beg Artemis to take her. The girl holds out her handmade bow. "Please," she says, "let me run with you." There's a silence. This isn't the first time a mortal has asked. Some were granted the honor, those who could keep up, who never questioned, who pledged themselves without hesitation. But most were turned away. Artemis had no patience for flattery, or for pity. This girl, though, Artemis steps closer, her face unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she kneels. She touches the girl's shoulder, lifts the crude bow, tests its weight. And then this is true, by the way, recorded in the lesser-known Parian marble. Artemis accepts her. The girl becomes one of the few mortals ever to run with the goddess. Her name, lost to time. But they say her spirit still lingers near certain olive groves, especially when the moon's high and no one's watching. A quirky fact in some rural parts of Arcadia, young girls training for athletic games would secretly carve Artemis's name into their sandals for luck. Apparently, a few archaeologists have uncovered these sandals, and yes, some of them also had tiny doodles of stags. Cute, you walk alongside them now, goddess and girl teacher and pupil. There's laughter, not giggling, mind you. Artemis doesn't giggle, but something deeper, a warm chuckle that bubbles up when no one's looking. They run, and you follow through the night's slick woods, heart full, breath quiet. Tonight you don't need to understand everything. You just need to keep up. You wake, or think you do, to the scent of pine sap and roasted chestnuts. Dawn hasn't broken yet, but the forest glows faintly with that soft blue light that comes just before the sky remembers the sun. You're still among them, Artemis and her nymphs, and the mortal girl with the goat hide quiver. They're sleeping in a circle, heads resting on moss, a bough or two, clutched even in dreams. Artemis lies at the center, utterly still, as if listening to a silence only gods can hear. She sleeps with her eyes half open. Of course she does. You shift your weight, and a twig snaps. Instantly Artemis is on her feet, bow-drawn gaze, sharp. The nymphs scramble too, like wolves startled mid-dream. She sees it's you and lowers her bow, but doesn't smile. Artemis rarely does in the mornings. You get the feeling she's not a coffee and croissant goddess, more like pine needles and icy streams. She gestures for you to follow. The group begins moving again, this time toward higher ground. You scramble up behind them, breathing hard. Artemis never looks winded. Gravity appears to work differently for her. Or maybe she just ignores it out of principle. You reach a high ridge and look out. Below lies a valley still tucked in shadow. A herd of deer moves slowly across the clearing, their silhouettes long and ghostly. Artemis watches them like an artist studying a painting. You sit beside her. "Do you always watch first?" you ask. She doesn't answer. Instead, she points to the edge of the herd. One of the deer limps, barely noticeable, but she saw it instantly. "That one dies first," she says, not coldly, just knowingly, as if the forest told her, and you get it now. The hunt for her isn't bloodlust, it's balance, the removal of weakness so that strength can remain. She doesn't kill to conquer, she kills to correct. mainstream fact. In many ancient Greek festivals honoring Artemis, like the Brauronia young girls would mimic bears as part of ritual dances. Some scholars believe this symbolized a transition from childhood to womanhood under Artemis's guidance. Others suggest it was just an excuse for kids to growl in public. But the bear connection runs deep. You see it now. She kneels and draws a symbol in the dirt, a crescent moon, a stag, and a bear claw, her trinity. A low whistle echoes through the trees. One of her nymphs returns with news a traveller male was spotted near the sacred spring. Alone, armed, uninvited. Artemis's expression doesn't change, but her eyes flicker. The mortal girl looks nervous. You all move swiftly through the woods, the air tightening with anticipation. Artemis leads without speaking. Every branch moves aside for her. Even the wind seems careful. Soon you reach the spring, its beautiful clear water tumbling over smooth stones, steam rising in lazy spirals. But beside it, half hidden in ferns, lies a man's cloak and boot prints, fresh. Artemis kneels, runs a finger over the prints. She sniffs the air. "Hoplite," she murmurs, "from Thebes." How does she know? Scent soil divine Wi-Fi. Who knows? But she's right. She turns to the mortal girl and says softly, "Wait here. You do too, because honestly, who's going to argue?" She moves toward the grove like a shadow wearing sandals. The rest of you stay behind, pretending not to be terrified. Minutes pass. Then rustling. A man stumbles out of the trees, barefoot tunic torn, bleeding from his arm. He collapses beside the spring, gasping. His lips move, but no sound comes out. Artemis follows, stepping into view like a verdict. The man scrambles back, eyes wide. "Please," he rasps. "I didn't know this place." He's shaking. Clearly he's heard the stories, that those who trespass in Artemis's sacred groves don't leave. And let's be real, those stories aren't exactly exaggerated. Quirky tidbit. A 3rd century BCE inscription in the region of Locris actually banned men from entering a specific grove dedicated to Artemis under penalty of death or public embarrassment, which in Greece was often worse. You look to Artemis. She raises her bow. The man flinches. His hands fly up. His eyes plead. And for a long moment the forest holds its breath. Then nothing. She lowers the bow. He blinks. So do you. She looks at the man and says one word, "Go," and he does, limping, panting, vanishing into the trees like he never existed. The nymphs emerge, stunned. Artemis doesn't explain. She just turns and begins walking, but you notice it, the way her jaw clenches, the way her fingers twitch around the bow. Something has changed. This night was supposed to be like all the others. It isn't. You trail her now in silence, the others keeping a respectful distance. No one dares ask why the arrow wasn't loosed. Not even the mortal girl who's been so eager to learn Artemis's ways. The forest around you seems unsettled, as though the trees themselves are whispering, did she really let him go? For a goddess whose myths are often painted in absolutes, hunt or be hunted, purity or punishment. This ambiguity feels like a tremor under sacred stone. She walks ahead of you fast. Her movements are tight now, less fluid, less forest, and more Olympus. Her bow remains in hand, though unused. A quiet tension hums around her like static. You reach a stream, and the group stops to drink. The water is cold and sweet, and yet it can't wash down the taste of what just happened. One of the nymphs, Eileithyia, if you remember right, finally breaks the silence. "You didn't shoot him," she says, almost accusingly. Artemis doesn't respond. She just stares at the stream. Her reflection shimmers moonlight dancing on water, a face that belongs on coinage and constellations. The mortal girl looks at you. Does this mean the rules can be broken? You don't know what to say? Honestly, you're still trying to figure out the same thing. Mainstream fact. In Homer's Iliad, Artemis is portrayed as fiercely temperamental, even getting into a divine slap fight with Hera. Not exactly someone you'd expect to show restraint, but mythology contradicts itself frequently and with flair. One scroll giveth, another taketh away. You hike on. The next clearing you reach is a circle of ancient standing stones. They rise like teeth from the earth, each etched with faded runes. This is a place of judgment, an old court predating even Olympus's rule. Not many know of it, but Artemis does. She sits in the center, legs crossed, bow beside her. You all sit too, forming a loose circle. The moon breaks through the canopy and pours itself onto the stones like spilled milk. What makes a life worth sparing? She asks suddenly. No one answers. Then she points to the mortal girl. You, the girl startles.
Me you beg to join us, to abandon your path and take another? Did you deserve it? The girl hesitates. I don't know. I hoped so. Artemis nods slowly. And if you had lied to me, hidden something, would you still have deserved mercy? The girl shrinks. Her voice drops. Maybe not. Artemis turns to the group. The man at the spring? He was a soldier, but he didn't draw his weapon. He didn't know this was sacred ground. Does ignorance excuse trespass? Asks one of the older nymphs. Her voice is sharp. Sometimes, Artemis says. Sometimes fear teaches faster than punishment. You lean back against a stone and stare up. The stars above seem to pulse slightly, like they're leaning in too. This feels bigger than just one choice. This feels like a moment that splits timelines. Artemis continues. He was bleeding, afraid, alone.
And for once I wondered, what if the story ended differently? Quirky tidbit. Some fringe scholars believe Artemis had a secret cult devoted to non-violence. Yes, really. Based on fragmentary texts found near Knossos, there's speculation that a handful of worshippers honored Artemis not as a huntress, but as a healer goddess of withheld arrows. Naturally, mainstream academia side-eyes this theory, like it's a drunk satyr at a symposium. But tonight you wonder if there's something to it. The wind picks up, the trees sway in sympathy. Then suddenly a rustling from the edge of the clearing. Everyone turns. It's the man. He's come back, still limping, still bleeding, but not running. He holds something in his hands, a bundle wrapped in cloth. He steps carefully into the circle and kneels. I didn't know who you were, he says, voice hoarse. I meant no offense. I saw the spring and I thought I could clean the wound. He unwraps the cloth.
Inside is a small bronze amulet, an old one shaped like a running deer. It was my sister's, he says. She died last winter. She always prayed to the moon. Artemis stares at the amulet. I came here not to trespass, he says, eyes wet now, but because I thought maybe you could still see her. Maybe you remembered. Silence. Then Artemis rises. She crosses to him, takes the amulet, and in a gesture no mortal has recorded because you are the only witness, she places it over her heart and says, she runs with me now. No thunder crashes, no divine fireworks, just a man kneeling in disbelief and a goddess who just this once chose grace over judgment. And then just like that, the man is gone. The clearing empties, the moment dissolves, but you stay. You sit there surrounded by ancient stones and a new kind of silence. Something has shifted, not just in Artemis, but in the very forest itself. Tonight, the moon spared a life. The forest breathes differently now.
You feel it in the wind, a kind of quiet pride that rolls down from the hills like mist. Artemis walks ahead of you once more, but her steps are slower, more measured. She's not avoiding the others, she's just thinking. Which for a goddess used to instinct and arrow-point certainty is almost revolutionary. The nymphs keep a respectful distance. Even they don't know what to make of it. Normally, by now, the transgressor would be stardust or a cautionary tale embroidered onto temple tapestries. But no arrow flew last night, no thunder, no curse. Just Artemis, choosing not to be Artemis at least for a heartbeat. You pass a thicket of laurel trees, tall, solemn, rustling secrets only Artemis can decipher. The mortal girl lingers at the rear, unusually quiet. Her gaze keeps drifting to her mentor's back, as if trying to read a story there. At last, one of the nymphs speaks. Will you tell the others Artemis doesn't look back? They'll know. You reach a sacred clearing where a small altar waits carved from marble and overgrown with ivy. Offerings have been left here over generations, little clay figurines, burnt pine cones' teeth, human and otherwise, and even a small bronze mirror, one of the more fringy tidbits. In some rural mountain villages of Thessaly, young women believed that burying a lock of hair here would guarantee Artemis's protection during childbirth, despite the whole eternal virginity vibe. Historians still argue whether this was desperation, syncretism, or just village rumor gone rogue. Artemis kneels before the altar and places the deer-shaped amulet the soldier gave her beside the mirror. The ivy seems to lean toward it, wrapping it gently, as if recognizing its worth. You sit beside a crooked olive tree as the others fan out into the glade. One of the younger nymphs, barefooted and bright-eyed, sits cross-legged next to you. She nudges your arm.
Has she done that before? Spared someone? You shrug. Maybe once, maybe never. She chews her lip. I don't think I'd know what to do if she spared me. It's easier, isn't it, when things are just black and white? She's right. Artemis has always been a goddess of absolutes. But you're beginning to see the cracks in that marble, and strangely the cracks make her stronger. A soft whistle rises from the woods, not a warning this time, but a song. You turn and see a line of deer at the far edge of the clearing, watching. They don't run, they don't even blink. Artemis rises slowly and walks toward them. Not hunting, just meeting. She extends a hand and the largest buck steps forward, touches her fingers with his nose and turns back into the trees. That's not a metaphor. That actually happens. You rise and follow her. The others do too. The forest rearranges itself to let you pass, like it's glad you're finally seeing it clearly.
You ask her, was it hard, not killing him? She stops. Yes, that's all, but it's enough. Mainstream fact. Artemis was often invoked by women during childbirth, particularly for safe deliveries. Odd, isn't it, that a goddess who swore off motherhood became one of the most called upon figures during labor? Scholars chalk it up to her role as protector of transitions, birth, death, and everything between. You arrive at a hilltop clearing. From here, the Aegean stretches endlessly, stars reflected on its surface like coins in a sacred well. Artemis sits at the edge, legs dangling over centuries of mortal questions. You join her. You changed, you say. She looks at you, her eyes moon-silver. Maybe. Another silence. Then she chuckles just once under her breath. It's strange, she says. All my life I thought sparing someone would make me weak. But it doesn't. It just makes me uncertain. And I think that's worse. You nod, because you get it. Gods weren't built for second guessing. Then she adds, almost too softly, but sometimes uncertainty feels more sacred than certainty ever did. A night breeze lifts her hair. Somewhere below an owl cries out, less warning, more lullaby. You lie back and stare at the stars. They blink slowly as if saying, now you're paying attention. And above them all, the moon glows steady, not judging, not accusing, just watching. Tonight Artemis is not the goddess of the hunt, not entirely. Tonight she is the goddess of pause, of hesitation, of the sacred breath before the arrow flies. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Morning arrives lazily like a cat stretching across the spine of the sky. You wake to sunlight dripping through the canopy in golden strands, birds chirping as if rehearsing a play, and the scent of bay leaves warming on stone. Artemis is already awake, of course. She's sitting on a log sharpening an arrow with a flint stone, although you're not sure if it's for symbolism or actual use. The rest of the group stirs slowly. Nymphs rub sleep from their eyes. The mortal girl braids her hair with fresh pine needles, and someone has gathered wild strawberries. They taste sweet, slightly tart, and somehow divine, probably because they are. You take a walk to clear your head. The events of the past night cling to you like damp mist. There's a heaviness in your chest, not unpleasant, but thoughtful, like you've witnessed something that cracked open a new layer of the world. As you wander, your feet lead you to a trail carved along a cliffside. It overlooks a deep blue inlet where fishermen have prayed to Artemis for calm seas since time remembered how to count. You spot faded offerings wedged in rock crevices, shell necklaces, worn sandals, and one tiny wax figurine of a deer, melted at the edges but still upright. You return to the camp just in time to hear voices raised not angrily but heated with confusion. Two nymphs are arguing. She shouldn't have let him go, one says. The law is clear, and if the law is wrong, the other retort. Artemis stands and the forest hushes. She doesn't yell. She rarely needs to. She just lifts one hand and the conversation folds into silence. Laws, she says, are meant to guard the sacred, but if they begin to smother it, she trails off as if even she doesn't know how to finish that sentence yet, but you feel the ending. Then they must bend. Mainstream fact. The laws of ancient temples were often inscribed in stone and rarely changed, but some priesthoods, particularly those of Artemis, allowed for annual reinterpretation, a practical nod to the goddess's unpredictable, ever-evolving nature. The nymphs exchange glances but say nothing more. Later that day, the group migrates downhill to a low valley where Artemis once performed the festival rites of Broron. You recognize the landscape from old descriptions, a flat marshy plain where girls dressed as bears would dance for the goddess. It's mostly reeds and memory now, but the spirit lingers. Artemis stops at a dry patch and removes her sandals, if you can call them that. They're more like divine foot suggestions made of moon thread and attitude. She steps into the muck without hesitation. The others follow. You do too. And then, with no warning, she begins to dance. It's not graceful, not the kind of thing mortals would carve into marble or sing songs about. It's wild, a tangle of limbs and laughter and splashes. She howls once, yes, howls, and the others echo her startled but exhilarated. Even the mortal girl joins in, eyes wide with delight. This isn't a ritual, this is release. You watch Artemis laugh genuinely loudly, like someone who's finally forgiven herself for not being perfect. Quirky tidbit. There's a fringe theory that Artemis's cult encouraged emotional catharsis through animal mimicry, particularly bear roars and deer stamps. While mostly dismissed as exaggerated by modern scholars, one fresco from Broron does depict a chorus of girls mid-snarl. So, maybe later, after everyone's caught their breath and their dignity, Artemis sits with you beneath a fig tree. She peels the fruit slowly, offering you half. "Did you ever think gods could change?" she asks. You chew. "I think you already did." She smiles. It's small, quiet, but real. Then she says something that stays with you long after the fig is gone. Perhaps sparing a life isn't weakness. Perhaps it's just strength that remembers where it came from. The wind picks up, lifting the scent of moss and fig skin. You lean back against a tree and close your eyes. Somewhere nearby, the mortal girl is humming. The melody is strange, untrained, but there's something divine threading through it now, as if her voice has caught the echo of Artemis's decision and woven it into sound. You wonder what kind of stories will be told of this day, of a goddess who hesitated, of a rule rewritten under moonlight, and you wonder if centuries from now someone will sit where you're sitting, feel what you're feeling, and realize that even the divine are still learning how to be whole. The days stretch long in Artemis's forest, golden at the edges and drowsy in the middle, like the world itself is holding its breath between thunderclaps. You've stayed longer than you thought you would, long enough to forget what sandals feel like when they aren't coated in pine sap and memory. Today the air smells like crushed mint and cedar smoke. The nymphs are repairing their camp, weaving reeds into mats and hanging bundles of herbs from tree branches like charms. The mortal girl, let's call her Thaleia, though no one said her name aloud, has taken to the tasks quickly, now plaiting rope while balancing a fig in her mouth. You walk with Artemis again, this time deeper into the forest's uncharted core. It's quieter here, older somehow. The trees curve like rib bones, the light trickles through in thin golden strands, and you start to feel that familiar sense again that time isn't exactly moving forward here. "Do you believe in fate?" she asks suddenly. You pause, unsure whether she's actually asking you or just thinking out loud. She continues, "Because I don't. Not the way the Moirai tell it. Mainstream fact, the Moirai, the Fates, were believed to control every life's thread from first breath to final silence. Even the gods were supposedly bound by their decisions, which made them, let's say, unpopular dinner guests. I've watched too many paths change," Artemis says. "Too many lives defy what was written. Why do you stop at a fork in the trail, two nearly identical paths disappearing into fern and shadow?" She gestures toward the right one. "This is the way most would choose." You point to the left, but that's the one you'll take. She smiles again, barely. Exactly. You follow her down the less beaten path, ducking beneath hanging vines that shimmer faintly under her presence. After a few minutes, you reach a glade so still it feels untouched by even wind. In the center stands a lone stone column, cracked and lichen-covered, with only one word, still legible, epiekis, mercy. Quirky detail. There's evidence that in certain backcountry temples, particularly near Mount Lycaon, Artemis was occasionally invoked, with epithets related not to hunting, but to justice and leniency. Artemis Epiekes, or Artemis the Gentle. Naturally, those interpretations were quietly shelved by the time Athens got around to polishing its mythology. Artemis places her hand on the stone bowing her head. You do the same, not entirely sure why. Then you hear it, a voice not from outside but inside, soft, like someone is thinking at you. She changed it, says, "You look at Artemis, she's staring at you like she heard it too. There are places in the forest where memory gets stuck," she murmurs, "where even gods can hear what the world remembers." You glance back at the pillar. A breeze stirs, and in it, the faintest murmur, "She spared a life." You walk on in silence, not because there's nothing to say, but because the moment deserves silence. Later that evening, a fire crackles at camp. Nymphs roast pine nuts and pass around bundles of time-wrapped mushrooms. Thaleia sits near Artemis, her feet tucked beneath her hands, busy carving a crescent moon into a piece of driftwood. You sit beside them, holding a cup of river water that tastes inexplicably like lemon. Because of course it does. Then Artemis asks Thaleia, "Why did you really come to my forest?" The girl hesitates.
"I told you, I didn't want to be sold." Artemis nods slowly. "But that's not all." The girl swallows. "I wanted to be someone else, not just someone's daughter or someone's wife." And now Artemis asks. Thaleia looks at her carving. "Now I don't want to be someone else, I just want to be mine." There's a quiet around the fire, then heavier than silence, the kind that says, "Yes, that." And Artemis places her hand on the girl's shoulder. "Then you are." You sip your lemony river water and stare into the fire. The logs crackle like applause. Above you, the moon rises again, same as ever. Pale calm, unwavering. And yet you swear it looks gentler somehow, like maybe it too has learned something new. The next morning is all bronze light and cicada songs the forest, vibrating gently like the strings of a lyre, tuned just slightly too low.
You stir under a blanket of woven grass and deer hide, blinking at the canopy above you, unsure for a moment whether you're still dreaming. Thaleia is already awake, sitting cross-legged in the morning mist, whispering something to a beetle on her palm. You stretch bones, cracking like twigs, and rise to follow Artemis once again. Today she walks with purpose. There's a shift in the way she moves, less drifting goddess, more huntress on a mission. Her bow is strung, her eyes are alert. You fall into step behind her, careful not to make too much noise, though the forest still muffles your every move, like it's grown used to your presence. She leads you to a ridge you haven't seen before. From here, you overlook a stretch of land burned by lightning seasons ago. Blackened tree stumps jut from the earth like broken spears. The contrast is jarring. On one side, lush green. On the other, silent ruin. Artemis doesn't speak for a while. Then she says, "I caused that." You glance at her. "Not on purpose," she continues. "A town cut too many trees, burned the wrong herbs, took more deer than they needed. So I answered with fire." Mainstream fact: Artemis was deeply associated with nature's balance. When mortals disrupted the order, especially sacred groves or animal populations, she was believed to respond with plague, drought, or lightning, the scorched earth policy, literally. She steps forward and kneels, touching the edge where green meets charred. "I was right," she says, "but I wonder now, was I also wrong?" The question dangles in the air, fragile and enormous. "Would you undo it?" you ask. She considers. "No, but I might have spoken first, given them a chance." You nod. That's growth, right? Not erasing your past, but reshaping your future with it. You sit beside her and look out over the land. Amid the blackened soil, you spot small bursts of green saplings, wildflowers, stubborn things daring to return. The forest forgives, slowly, she says. But it does forgive, a curious fact. Some plants only bloom after fire. Heat cracks their seed shells, triggering growth. Artemis seems to find comfort in this. Destruction doesn't always mean ending, it can mean beginning. She stands. Come. And you do deeper into the burnt land where the soil still smells of charcoal. Thaleia joins you, halfway holding a leather pouch. Inside she carries seedlings, fig laurel, and something she insists is a moonflower, though no one's entirely sure what that is. Together the three of you begin planting. It's messy work. Your hands get filthy. Artemis rips her sleeve. At one point, Thaleia sneezes so hard she topples into a sapling pit. There's laughter, real unguarded, messy laughter. You hadn't expected this. You hadn't expected to watch a goddess kneel in the dirt dig with her hands and hum under her breath like a farmer preparing for spring. And yet here she is. When the last seedling is covered, Artemis stands and brushes dirt from her knees. Let them tell stories of this, she says. Not the fire, this. You glance at her, and for the first time she looks truly at peace. Not because she's abandoned who she was, but because she's adding something new to it. A shadow moves at the tree line. You tense. Artemis doesn't. It's a wolf. Lean, silver-furred, watching. It tilts its head, then melts into the green. That's a good sign, she says. Apparently it is. On the way back, Thaleia walks between you, swinging the empty pouch and whistling tunelessly. Artemis lets her speak freely, even when she rambles about dream goats and berry rituals and how her feet smell like divinity now. You ask Artemis, "Do you regret anything?" She thinks for a while. Then only what I never questioned. The sun slips lower. The forest shifts colour from gold to rose to violet. The trees breathe deeper. The birds switch songs. And for the first time since your arrival, you feel something loosen inside you, some knot you didn't know was tied. You smile. Artemis notices. She doesn't smile back, but she does nod. And somehow that's better. You awake to rain. Not a storm, just a slow, soft drizzle, the kind that seems designed for reflection rather than inconvenience. The canopy above weeps gently, each drop sliding down a leaf like a prayer. The forest floor is damp but not cold, and the air smells like wet bark moss and distant thunder that never arrives. Artemis walks barefoot through the mud. Her cloak is soaked, but she doesn't seem to mind. She moves with purpose, yet again this time toward the river at the edge of her domain. The others don't follow. You do. You find her kneeling at the riverbank, her hands cupped beneath the flow face, lifted to the rain. Not dramatic, not ceremonial, just present. This river remembers everything she says as you approach. Blood, footsteps, arrows, mercy. The current glides past, clear and cold. She reaches into a pouch and removes something you recognize, the deer-shaped amulet. Still glinting faintly despite the overcast sky. "I'm returning it," she says. You want to ask why. You want to say it meant something, that it marked a change, a choice. But you stop yourself, because Artemis doesn't undo. She rebalances. She places the amulet into the water. It floats for a moment, spinning, shimmering, then sinks. The current takes it, and with it, something heavy in your chest lifts. Mainstream fact. In some regions of ancient Greece, sacred objects were intentionally submerged in rivers as offerings, gifts to nature, signs of humility. Artemis had multiple river sanctuaries, particularly in Thessaly and near the Eurotas, where travelers would leave tokens in return for safe passage or fertility. You just watched one such ritual, ancient and unscripted. The rain slows. You and Artemis sit together on a flat stone watching mist rise from the water. After a while she speaks. Do you think gods get tired? You shrug. I think they hide it better than mortals. She laughs, and it's a soft thing like wind through feathers. I envy mortals sometimes, she says. You get to change and call it growth. We change and call it contradiction. She pulls a laurel leaf from the water and spins it between her fingers. You know the story of Daphne, she asks. You nod. Of course you do. The nymph who fled Apollo's advances, who prayed to be saved and was turned into a laurel tree. My brother loved her, Artemis says, in his way, and she didn't love him back. She places the leaf on the water. It floats beside a swirl of foam and disappears. I admired her, she adds, not for running, for refusing to become someone she wasn't, even if it cost her everything. You think about Thaleia, about the spared soldier, about Artemis herself standing alone on a moonlit night bow, lowered law, broken. You ask, did anyone ever spare you? She doesn't answer. Instead, she lifts her hand to the sky. A hawk appears, sharp-eyed, golden-feathered, circling above the river. It cries once and disappears into the mist. Time to return, she says. You walk back together. The forest is quiet now in that way. Old things get quiet when they're listening closely. Every step feels padded, respectful. The rain has washed the ground clean, not erased, just softened. Back at camp, the others are preparing for departure. Thaleia has woven a garland of ivy and laurel and is insisting the others wear them on their heads so they look properly divine. One nymph is dramatically resisting, another is trying to turn hers into a slingshot. Classic chaos. Artemis watches from the shadows, smiling in that way she does, barely but entirely. Will she stay, you ask? For a while, she replies, maybe longer. The forest hasn't said yet. The nymphs begin a song off-key but enthusiastic. It's an old hymn to Artemis, one rarely sung anymore. Not the usual praise about her silver arrows or terrifying temper. This one is different. It speaks of her quiet moments, of her laughter by rivers, her breath in the trees, her silences that hold more mercy than thunder ever could. You sit by the fire cup, warm in your hands, the scent of lemon leaves drifting upward. Thaleia sits beside you and says, I think the forest is changing. You nod. I think it already has. She looks up at the moon rising now, clear and whole. Do you think she'll ever spare another? She asks. You look across the camp at Artemis kneeling to tie a nymph's sandal, completely unnoticed, and you say she just might. You wake to laughter, not the delicate mythical kind that echoes through marble halls or drifts on harpstrings. No, this is full-body, messy laughter, the kind that leaves you hiccuping and wiping tears on your sleeve. You sit up, confused for a moment. Had Artemis's camp always been so noisy? The answer is yes and no. You peek through a cluster of ferns to find Thaleia attempting to teach a few nymphs a mortal game involving sticks, a pine cone, and a lot of improvised rules. Artemis watches from a tree stump nearby, chin on her hand, amused but uninvested. It's a moment you never expected to witness. The goddess of the hunt surrounded by chaos and mirth, not order and fear. You stretch and wander over. The fire is down to coals, but someone's cooking something that smells suspiciously like honeyed mushrooms. Artemis gestures for you to walk with her again. You don't hesitate. Today's path winds through a stretch of cedar trees, tall enough to lose sight of the sky. The light filters through in columns, and it feels like walking through the beams of an ancient cathedral, except the walls breathe and the ceiling rains pine needles. You've stayed longer than most, she says. You nod. I don't really know how to leave. She doesn't smile, but her eyes soften. Most don't, she replies. They wait for the forest to let them go. Mainstream fact. In some mythic traditions, mortals who entered Artemis's domain either never returned or came back years older, having lost all track of time. A handful of ancient inscriptions warn step under her moon and forget the sun. Of course, those warnings were rarely followed. Humans have always been curious. The forest opens into a clearing dotted with old stone markers, altars perhaps, or grave memorials. The inscriptions are faded, but one is still clear. Mnemis charin, for the sake of memory. Artemis kneels before it and lays a sprig of sage. These are for the ones I didn't spare, she says, voice barely above a whisper. You kneel too. The air is different here, not colder but still. Like sound doesn't move as fast. The trees stand farther apart, the sky is wider, and every gust of wind feels like it's carrying something heavier than air. I remember each one, she says, even the ones whose names were never spoken. You wonder if this is a sacred place. Then you realize, of course it is. But not because someone declared it so. Because she did, because remembering makes it sacred. Quirky tidbit. In the region of Phocis, archaeologists once discovered a grove dedicated to Artemis where every tree bore the carved initials of the dead, not warriors or nobles, but peasants, shepherds, mothers. The cult believed Artemis collected forgotten souls and gave them a home in her forest, a patron saint of the unnamed. You walk slowly through the clearing, brushing your fingers across the stone markers. One of them is warm,
Not just sun-warmed alive, as if the person it remembers is still watching. You look at Artemis. She's watching too. There's a myth, you say, that you turned a man to stone for lying to you. She nods. And another that I turned a liar into wind. And another where I didn't punish him at all. Which one's true, all of them, she says. And none. That's the thing about myths. They carry multiple truths like arrows in a quiver. You don't know which one you'll need until the moment calls for it. You return to camp in time to see Thaleia painting her face with berry juice, declaring herself queen of the wild turnips. The nymphs cheer. Someone's made a crown out of twigs. It's slightly lopsided, but no one seems to mind. Artemis watches from a distance, arms crossed. She's adapting well, you say. She's remembering who she is, Artemis corrects. That's rarer. The moon begins to rise behind her, just a sliver tonight. A crescent like a blade's edge, or a smile that hasn't decided what mood it's in. The stars follow, blinking into place like old friends. You lie back on the moss and let your mind drift. What stays with you isn't the mercy or the broken rule or even the change. It's this, that even a goddess known for silence, for vengeance, for swift, clean death, can kneel in front of a stone and whisper a name she never spoke aloud. And that is something not even Olympus dares to challenge. By now you can tell when Artemis is about to disappear. She doesn't warn anyone. No dramatic exits, no gleaming portals. She simply vanishes into the trees as if becoming one of them, leaving behind the faint smell of crushed laurel
and the kind of silence that only follows important things. This morning, she's already gone when you rise. The camp is awake, but subdued. Thaleia stirs embers into flame her hair, a tangled wreath of leaves. The nymphs lounge in hammocks of ivy, nibbling on fruit and arguing softly about whether starlight weighs anything. You listen in, but your thoughts drift. You step away from the clearing shoes, forgotten feet, sinking softly into damp earth. You don't look for her, you just walk, and somehow, predictably, the path finds her first. She stands at the edge of a small pond, its surface perfectly still, the kind of stillness that feels performative, like the water's holding its breath in case it's being watched. Artemis doesn't move. You approach slowly. "The stars are missing," she says, eyes on the reflection. You look up. No, they're all there. "Not above?" She murmurs. "Here, in the water." You follow her gaze. She's right. The sky above is littered with stars, but the water reflects only the moon. No constellations, no scattered sparkles, just one shining silver coin suspended in dark velvet. "It happens," she says, "when I've broken something inside myself. The pond forgets to echo what I see." You sit beside her, unsure what to say. The moonlight kisses your skin, and the silence feels thick enough to chew. Mainstream fact. In Greek mythology, reflections weren't just metaphors, they were messengers. Lakes and polished metal were often believed to show not what was, but what was felt. The Orphic cults believed that certain gods couldn't see their own reflections after moments of betrayal. They called it sacred blindness. "Do you regret it?" you ask finally. She doesn't answer. Instead, she steps into the pond ankle-deep, then knee-deep, until the moon wraps around her like a cloak. She closes her eyes and breathes. And when she opens them, the stars appear again in the water, one by one. She smiles. Not broadly, not for show. Just a private curve of lips, a moment of inner alignment. You look down at the water beside her. The stars now shimmer for you too.
"I thought sparing him would make me feel powerful," she says, walking back to the bank. "It didn't. It made me feel human." There it is. The truth at the center of the whole story. She brushes droplets from her arms and sits beside you. The frogs begin to sing. A tiny chorus, not much for harmony, but enthusiastic. Then out of nowhere she asks, "Do you want to know what I would have done 100 years ago?" You nod. "I would have killed him, then turned him into a stag, then hunted the stag, then mounted his antlers in a cloud palace and called it justice." You blink. She grins. "Progress, huh?" You both laugh. It echoes across the pond. Quirky tidbit. There's a debated tale from a lost Alexandrian manuscript in which Artemis weeps, not out of sorrow but confusion, after sparing a shepherd who accidentally wandered into her temple. The scroll ends mid-sentence right after the line, "And the moonlight did not touch her that night."
Historians still argue whether it was metaphor, scribal error, or a poetic tantrum. The frogs stop. A breeze rolls through the reeds. She looks at you. Really looks. "I didn't spare him for him," she says. "I spared him for me." And somehow that feels truer than anything else. The forest behind you rustles. Thaleia appears at the edge, holding a bundle of figs and looking confused. She mouths, "Is this a bad time?" You wave her over. Artemis just shakes her head with the faintest smile. The three of you sit in silence, watching stars reflect on water and fireflies pretend to be constellations. The night deepens. and you realize there is no final version of Artemis. There's only the path she walks and the stillness she leaves behind. You're not sure what time it is anymore. The moon has waxed and waned at least once since your arrival, but Artemis's forest doesn't count time like the world outside. Days blend into nights. Events loop like the rings of an ancient tree spiraling inward instead of forward. Tonight, the camp is quiet, not sleepy, but contemplative. A hush has settled. Thalea is braiding vines into a kind of necklace while reciting a poem she's clearly inventing on the spot. It's about a rabbit who stole a thunderbolt and now lives as a constellation. The rhythm is questionable, but the heart is pure. You sit by the fire with Artemis again. She's fletching arrows, silver-tipped, feathered with swan down. Her hands move automatically, like memory made flesh. But her eyes keep drifting skyward. "Do you believe the stars watch us?" she asks. "Only the interesting ones," you reply. She chuckles. "Then they must be bored most of the time." The fire crackles in agreement. You glance at her quiver. "Do you still need those?" She doesn't answer immediately. "Then I'll always carry them. But I don't always have to use them." There's a pause. You look out into the trees, expecting something to break the silence. An owl hoot, a branch snap, a falling acorn. But nothing comes. Instead, she speaks again. "You've seen enough of me to know I wasn't made for softness." You tilt your head. "I dunno. I've seen you spare a man plant a tree and listen to a teenager try a rhyme thunderbolt with goat. That counts." She laughs again, less like a goddess, more like someone you'd want to share bad olives with at a tavern. Then her gaze sharpens. "But I am not just mercy. I haven't traded my arrows for lullabies." You nod. "You've added one more weapon." She looks at you. "Which one?" Discernment. Mainstream fact: Artemis was one of the few Olympian deities who remained largely unchanged throughout the centuries in both iconography and worship. Always the huntress, always the virgin, always the twin. But lesser-known regional variants hinted at more complex versions: Artemis the midwife, Artemis of the threshold, Artemis of the long pause. Tonight you sit with all of them. She rises and gestures for you to follow. You walk a long way, feet silent on pine needles. The trees shift from cedar to oak to a ring of cypress trees so tall they seem to pierce the night sky. In the center of the grove is a stone circle. Unlike the others, you've seen this one glows faintly, etched runes, softly, pulsing like sleeping hearts. "This is where I wrote my vows," she says, "where I promised to remain untouched, unmoved." You step into the circle and feel it's something old, tight, almost sharp. "It's binding?" you ask. She nods. "It was, until recently." She places her hand on one of the stones, and now she closes her eyes. Now it listens. You walk around the circle, slowly, fingers grazing the runes. One of them is smudged, not weather-worn, but erased, deliberately. She notices.
"I did that," she says. "The night I spared him." "Does it change everything?" you ask. "No," she replies. "Just me. You look up." The moon is full now, silver and steady. And for the first time you understand she's not just the goddess of the hunt. She's the goddess of the moment before the hunt, of the breath, the question, the possibility. Quirky tidbit. In one extremely obscure Thessalian myth, Artemis was said to have once unstrung her bow and used it as a harp string in a temple to soothe a grieving child. It's widely considered apocryphal, or at least poetic license. But here in this clearing with the bow at her side and her gaze softer than stone, It feels plausible. You sit at the edge of the circle while Artemis traces the missing rune with her thumb. "I'm still who I was," she murmurs. "I know," you say. "You're just not only who you were." The wind shifts. A deer passes silently at the edge of the trees, pauses, then bows its head slightly before vanishing.
The forest recognizes her. All of her, the goddess, the hunter, the forgiver, the pause. You sit together wrapped in silver moonlight and something softer than myth. And this time, the stars do watch. You awaken not to sound, but to absence. No birdsong, no rustle. Even the breeze seems to have pressed pause. The fire has burned to faint grey embers. The camp is empty, not abandoned, just stepped away like the world agreed to give Artemis space this morning. You rise, following instinct more than direction. The moss beneath your feet feels chilled. Dew clings to your ankles. Somewhere in the distance you hear a crow cry, once then fall silent again. It's different today. You find Artemis by a standing pool, a still obsidian mirror cradled in stone. She's seated on a rock ledge, one knee drawn to her chest, her cloak pooled around her like a forgotten shadow. Her bow lies across her lap, unstrung. "Sit," she says without turning. You do. Neither of you speaks for a while. You stare into the water which reflects the sky with unsettling clarity. No ripples, no imperfections, just an unbroken dome of morning. "Have you ever broken your own rule?" she asks softly. You blink. "Recently, yes." She smiles faintly. "Hurts, doesn't it?" You nod. Mainstream fact? In early versions of Artemis's mythology, there were no recorded instances of her sparing a trespasser. Every myth is a variation of retribution. Actaeon turned to stag. Orion pierced by her own arrow. Niobe's children slaughtered after an insult. Mercy simply wasn't her thing until now. She exhales slowly. "I thought breaking a vow would feel like lightning, loud, irreversible. But it was more like quiet. Like setting down a weight I didn't realize I carried." You sit with that. Sometimes it's the things you've sworn never to do that tell you the most about who you are when you finally do them. Artemis glances at her bow.
"You know it was Apollo who told me to make the vow." You blink. "Really?" She nods. "After I was born, he said, never let them see you bleed." I was too young to know he meant the world, not just the battlefield. She looks up at the sky. I mistook strength for silence and vengeance for clarity. Quirky tidbit. One fringe, Orphic fragment, suggests that Artemis and Apollo argued frequently about mortal fate, especially when Artemis spared women or children. One line, partially preserved, reads, "Why should the moon hesitate?" To which she answers, "Because it can." The fragment ends with Apollo throwing a lyre. Siblings. You turn to her. "Do you want to change your vow?" She thinks. "No, I just want to understand it better." You trace your finger along the edge of the pool. A tiny insect lands on the surface and walks across it like a tightrope. "I think vows should grow with the one who makes them," you say. She glances at you. "Did yours?" You hesitate, then nod.
Eventually, after they cracked a little. She smiles again. "Good. The ones that don't crack never get any light in." You laugh, softly startled. "That was poetic." She mock groans. "I've been spending too much time with mortals. Next thing you know, I'll be composing riddles." I'd listen, I wouldn't. A leaf falls from a nearby fig tree. It lands perfectly in the center of the still water. You both watch the ripples as they expand in slow, perfect circles. "They'll write stories about this, you know," you say. About the night you lowered your bow. Let them, she replies, but make sure they remember I still have it. You glance at her, and there's the glint again, that steel beneath moonlight, that predator's focus. She hasn't gone soft. She's gone sharp in a new direction. You rise, and so does she. The stillness lifts. The forest stirs. As you walk back, she asks, "Do you think they'll understand why I did it?" You shrug. Some will, some won't. But the ones who need the story will find it. She nods. Then that's enough. At camp, the fire's been rekindled. Thalea waves, holding something suspiciously like a half-charred turnip. The nymphs are dancing in a slow, spiraling circle, their song weaving between trees like smoke. Artemis watches them quietly. "They'll leave soon," she says. "Return to the world." "And you ask." "I'll stay," she answers, but not unchanged. The moon is faint in the daylight sky, a ghost of itself, but still present, still watching. And tonight, when it rises again, it will rise over a forest that remembers a different kind of power, a quiet one, a merciful one, a power that hesitated and found itself stronger for it. You wake before dawn, though it's hard to tell why. There's no alarm, no shout, no divine nudge in your dreams, just a pull. The kind of quiet pull that means something's happening. Not loud, not dangerous, just sacred. You rise and see that Artemis is already gone.
Typical. But the nymphs are up too, every single one. Even Thalea, half asleep and wrapped in a blanket that appears to be stitched from owl feathers and moss. No one's talking, they're just moving in the same direction. You follow. The path leads through a thin corridor of ash trees, each one carved with symbols you don't recognize. Spirals, stags, moons, what might even be an ancient joke in pictograph form. The air is cold and each breath tastes like cedar smoke and memory. Then you reach the hilltop. The sun is nowhere to be seen, but the eastern sky is brightening just a soft, purple blush on the horizon. And there at the center of a stone ring stands Artemis. She holds no weapon, no bow, no quiver, just a single laurel branch in her right hand. And for a heartbeat, you see her not as the huntress, not as the twin of Apollo or the goddess of childbirth or protector of girls, but simply as a woman who made a choice. She nods once, and the circle closes.
The nymphs begin to hum, low and slow like bees in winter. A ritual, but not the kind you'd find in temple records. This is older, earth, deep. Artemis steps forward and places the laurel branch into a shallow bowl carved into the stone. Beside it lies a strip of worn leather. You realize with a small jolt it's from her old bowstring. Mainstream fact, laurel branches were traditionally offered to Apollo, not Artemis. But in certain cult sites, particularly in Crete and Naxos, worshippers brought them to her to symbolizing clarity, not conquest. A vision before the act, a moment before the choice. Artemis raises her hands, not in blessing, in stillness. "Let this grove remember," she says, "that law is strength. But mercy is power. The wind picks up. You feel it not around you, through you, like your skin and breath and bones have all become part of this ritual. Let this grove remember," she continues, "that sparing does not soften the hand. It refines it." You look at Thalea. She's crying quietly, her face lit by that pale, not quite sunrise glow. "Let this grove remember," Artemis says, "that a single withheld arrow can echo louder than 100 loosed ones." Quirky tidbit. A half-preserved wall carving from Delos shows a bow hanging on a tree branch with a young girl below it and the phrase "Mnimis Charin," for memory's sake. Scholars couldn't decide if it was a retirement offering or a challenge. Either way, no one dared touch the bow again. The wind circles the hill, the leaves rustle like applause. Then, without drama, Artemis steps back. The laurel branch ignites. No flame, no heat. Just a silent glow that consumes the offering in a swirl of silver and gold light, leaving nothing behind but soft ash. And with that, the ritual is over. The sun breaches the horizon. Birdsong returns. A single sparrow chirps from the cypress. Another joins. Then a dozen. Artemis turns and walks down the hill. No announcement, no ceremony, just the end of something that had needed ending. You remain a while, the ash from the bowl swirling gently in the breeze. There's no instruction, no command, but you know this is the moment to remember. When you rejoin the others at camp, the mood has shifted. Lighter. Not cheerful exactly, but clean, like something old and sticky has been rinsed from the world. Thalea finds you and holds out a bundle. "I made this," she says a little sheepishly. Inside is a band of braided leather and vine with a small wooden charm carved into the shape of a bow. But instead of an arrow, the bow holds a sprig of laurel. You tie it around your wrist. She grins. Now you have to remember, too. Artemis is sharpening a blade nearby, pretending not to watch. But you see the corner of her mouth twitch, a smile, barely. And that's when you realize this story won't be written on scrolls. It won't be sung in amphitheaters or carved into marble. It'll be passed in quiet rituals, worn around wrists, felt in the breath between decisions. A goddess spared a man, and in doing so she changed everything. The forest feels different now, not louder, not wilder, just more aware. Like every root and reed has been listening to Artemis's silence, storing it like rain in dry soil. You walk with her again this morning, but it's not a path of escape or mission. It's a walk, simply to walk. Artemis moves slowly today, stopping now and then to run her fingers along tree bark or dip her hands in cool streams. There's no rush in her step, no shadows stalking her thoughts. It's the first time you've seen her walk without her bow. "You're unarmed," you say, gently. "I'm never unarmed," she replies, not unkindly. "I just don't need my hands to prove it." Fair. You come upon a field blanketed in wild thyme and low flowers. Bees float lazily in the golden light, and for a moment Artemis kneels to watch one close-up. You watch her watch it. It's kind of ridiculous.
And also utterly divine. She looks over her shoulder. "I like bees," she murmurs. "They do everything they're told until they don't." You raise a brow, a little projection maybe. She smirks. Mainstream fact Artemis was sometimes associated with bees, particularly in Ephesus, where priestesses in her temple were known as Melissa, meaning bee. They acted as spiritual intermediaries, guardians of sacred order. But unlike their goddess, they rarely deviated from routine. You keep walking. The sunlight slants low now, casting everything in a syrupy warmth. The path ahead opens into another clearing, but this one is different. Stone slabs encircle a central altar made of bone-white marble. Vines climb the stones, but the altar is clean, pristine, like it's scrubbed by unseen hands. "This is where I ended him," Artemis says quietly. You freeze. The last one I didn't spare. There's no judgment in her voice, just statement.
You approach the altar and see a faint, rust-coloured stain at one edge. Time has softened it, but it's still there. A shadow of a choice. "Do you remember his name, you ask?" She nods. Nerion, a sailor, lost. "Thought this was a shortcut." You wait. You don't interrupt. "I warned him," she says. He stepped forward anyway. A breeze stirs, the vines flutter like they're eavesdropping. I felt nothing, she adds. That's what haunts me. Not the killing, the numbness. You walk around the altar and sit on one of the stones. Did it change you? Yes, she says, sitting beside you, but it didn't touch me. I didn't let it, and that's what frightened me. You let that settle. The forest holds its breath. Quirky tidbit, one lesser-known myth, tells of a mortal who knelt before Artemis and begged not for his life, but for his death, a clean one, by her arrow. She granted it without hesitation, and afterward was said to whisper, "Let mercy sometimes be swift." Scholars believe this myth tried to reconcile her duality, a killer who could also be kind. Artemis brushes her hand across the altar. "I don't think I'll use this place again. You ask, will you destroy it?" "No," she replies. "It deserves to remain as memory." You understand now mercy is not forgetting. It's choosing to remember and still not punish. The moon rises early tonight, pale and unfinished, a crescent blade peeking shyly over the trees. "I'll keep hunting," she says. "Of course," you reply, "it's who you are, but I'll also keep pausing." She stands and looks to the sky. "That's new, that's mine." You rise with her, the altar behind you, the future ahead. As you return to camp, the path winds beside a stream so narrow it babbles like gossip. Thaleia waits beside it, holding something behind her back. When you approach, she grins and pulls out a wooden plaque. She's carved the words, "The day Artemis spared someone." Underneath is a badly drawn bow with a flower stuck in it. Artemis raises an eyebrow. "That's not flattering." Thaleia shrugs. "It's honest." The goddess takes the plaque, runs her fingers over the letters, and then without ceremony she hangs it on a nearby tree. Not hidden, not elevated, just there, visible to all who pass. A story planted like a seed. You sit together as the stars come out one by one, less like royalty and more like old friends arriving late to a gathering. The night feels gentle, honest, unhurried. You realize something else she didn't have to tell you about Nerion, but she did, and that makes all the difference. Because even gods, it turns out, want someone to witness their turning points, especially the ones that begin in silence. The forest is drowsy today. Sunlight filters through the leaves in sleepy patches, insects buzz without urgency, and even the wind seems content to nap in the arms of tall pines. You're walking beside Thaleia now. Artemis is somewhere ahead, alone again. "She's been quieter than usual," Thaleia says, adjusting the vine bracelet on her wrist. "She's thinking," you reply. "About the man," she asks. "About what comes after," you say. You reach a brook, where dragonflies skim the surface like living brushstrokes. Artemis is standing midstream water, rushing around her ankles, staring down at her own reflection. "I never meant to change," she says as you approach. "Not really." You wait. "But now that I have, I can't go back. Even if I wanted to." Her voice isn't mournful, it's clear, like spring water trickling through a crack in marble. Mainstream fact. There were temples where Artemis's image remained unchanged for centuries, statues untouched, rites recited word for word. But in traveling cults, especially among nomadic or rural populations, her image evolved healer-protector, midwife, shadow walker. Not contradictions, just different angles of the same moon. She steps out of the stream and tosses you a pebble. Smooth black, cool to the touch. "Keep it," she says. "To remember the moment everything didn't fall apart." You laugh softly. "That's not very dramatic. That's the point," she replies. You walk with her and Thalea to a small hill overlooking a valley. Below, a herd of deer grazes their coats, catching flecks of gold in the light. Artemis watches them with an unreadable expression. "I wonder what they'd think," she says, gesturing at the deer. "If they knew who I was, they'd probably run Thalea offers." "Not today," Artemis says. "Today I don't smell like death." That's true. There's something different about her scent now. Less iron, more myrrh. A subtle shift, but one you can't ignore. She sits on a flat rock and pulls a coil of silver thread from her pouch. It glints in the sun like spun lightning. From her satchel she draws a piece of cured leather worn at the edges. You watch her begin to stitch. "What are you making?" Thalea asks. "A new quiver," Artemis says. "One that holds more than arrows." You blink. What else will it hold? She threads the needle. Decisions. A quirky tidbit. In a fragment from a lost Aetolian scroll, Artemis is described as carrying a pouch that held wind's ashes and unspoken thoughts. Most historians dismiss it as poetic fluff. But now, you wonder. As she works, the stitching takes shape: a crescent moon, a tiny deer, and something new, a laurel branch curling beneath them like a question mark. "You're changing your emblem," you say, quietly. "I'm expanding it," she replies. When she finishes, she lays the quiver on the rock beside her. It glows faintly in the afternoon light, not from magic, but from intent. "This will confuse the bards," Thalea says, smirking. "Good," Artemis says. "Let them write harder." The three of you sit in silence, watching the deer shift through the grass like ghosts with nowhere urgent to be. Eventually Thalea curls up beside the rock and drifts off her head, resting on a patch of sun-warmed moss. Artemis tucks a hand beneath her cheek, motherly without meaning to. You stay awake because someone should. And while you do, Artemis begins to hum. It's not a melody, you know. It sounds like wind through dry branches, the lull of distant rivers, the soft strike of hoof on earth. It sounds like the in-between, the sacred pause, the place where stories don't end but open. You rest your chin on your knees and watch as the sun dips behind the cypress trees, casting long shadows across the valley. The deer remain, the girl dreams, the goddess hums. And you sit in a moment that centuries from now someone will call myth. Dawn creeps in like a secret. A hush falls over the grove, the kind of silence that's not empty, but waiting. Even the birds seem hesitant, as if unsure whether this morning deserves song. You rise slowly, stretching beneath a canopy turned amber by first light. Thalea's still curled on the moss, breathing softly. Artemis is already gone, but that's nothing new. What is new is the note, tied to a branch above the fire pit with a strand of silver thread. You untie it carefully. The handwriting is sharp and angled, etched like etchings made under Moonlight South Trail. Bring no one, you sigh. Of course. The South Trail begins in thorns and ends in fog. It's less a path than a negotiation. The forest closes in as you walk vines, brushing your arms like sleepy hands, the scent of rosemary and rain clinging to the soil. You find her near a collapsed column, moss-covered and half-swallowed by ivy. She's sitting cross-legged barefoot, her silver quiver beside her, the new one. You sit beside her without speaking. She offers you a piece of dried fig. You accept it. Ritual.
"I wanted to show you something," she says. She draws a circle in the dirt with a stick, then a second, then connects them with a line. This, she says, was the path I expected to walk. She adds a third circle off to the side, connected by a spiral. This, she says, is the path I'm on now.
You look at her. Do you regret it? No, she says. But I keep wondering if I'll have to fight harder now to be who I was. You don't, you reply. You just have to fight differently. Mainstream fact: in late classical sculptures, Artemis is often portrayed mid-motion, running, turning, drawing her bow. Rarely is she still, but one rare relief from Nemea shows her seated head, bowed hand on a fallen deer. It's not clear whether it's mourning or reverence. Art historians still argue whether the deer is dead or sleeping. She erases the lines in the dirt with her palm. I used to believe stillness was weakness, she says. Now I think stillness is the test.
You both sit still for a long time. Then she rises and gestures for you to follow. She leads you through a corridor of ancient pines until you reach a grove unlike any you've seen. It's silent, but not heavy. Open, but intimate. In the center stands a stone altar, newer than the others, with a small plaque carved with delicate care. For the one I spared. Beneath it, someone, probably her, has left 3 things: a sprig of laurel, a piece of the old bowstring, and a flat stone inscribed with a name he did not run. You feel your throat tighten. She watches your reaction, unreadable. I come here when I forget why, she says. Why what? Why I chose to break the law? Why I let someone see the soft part of the moon? You look at the plaque again. Do you regret letting him go? You ask, quietly. No, she says, but I regret that I almost didn't. She crouches, runs her fingers over the stone. I wasn't taught to hesitate, she says. I was taught to end, but you didn't. No, and the world didn't end either. She straightens and steps away. That's what scares me the most. Why? Because it means I could have chosen differently so many times. There it is again, the weight that comes not from guilt, but from hindsight. Quirky tidbit. A fragment from the lost scrolls of Kira suggests Artemis once sought out a mortal she had cursed years before, only to find he had already died. The line reads, "She knelt beside his stone, and the moonlight turned her footprints into flowers." The fragment is often dismissed as apocryphal, but you've started to believe those dismissed moments are often the truest. She turns back to you. I want this place to remain, she says. I want it to confuse the ones who come after. You raise an eyebrow. Let them wonder why I spared him, she says. Let them argue about whether it was mercy, strategy, or love. Which was it? She shrugs. Depends which part of me you ask. You both walk back slowly, the trees parting for her like breath through a reed pipe. The sunlight now is stronger, but still golden, still soft. A few birds have decided it's safe to sing again. Thalea is waiting near the fire, holding a cup of something steaming and weirdly purple. It's tea, she announces, or a potion. Time will tell. Artemis takes the cup, sips, grimaces slightly, and says, "Potion!" Laughter bubbles up around the camp. Even the wind seems to giggle. You sit with them, goddess girl traveller, and feel something settle. Not an ending, not a beginning. Just the spiral. The choice that didn't shatter the sky. The law that learned how to bend. The forest exhales. You feel it in the air, the loosened breath of old oaths of myths unclenched. Everything today feels softer, like the trees are content to sway instead of stand watch. No tests, no trespassers, no arrow tips aimed at hearts. Just Artemis, walking among her own decisions. You follow her through a stretch of meadow where the flowers grow with reckless colour, scarlet poppies, indigo hyacinths, golden crocus blooms. The nymphs trail behind like petals on the breeze,
their voices low, not singing but murmuring stories. Old ones passed like braided vines from throat to throat. Thaleia walks beside you now. She's carved something new onto her bracelet, a crescent moon cradling a tiny heart. She didn't notice, she says, pouting slightly. She noticed, you say. She didn't say anything. She wouldn't, you grin, but she noticed. Ahead, Artemis stops. A massive tree rises in the clearing, older than Olympus maybe. Gnarled like a fist, its roots tangled in the earth like sleeping serpents. You feel it in your bones. And this is one of those trees, the kind that existed before stories knew how to name things. She steps forward and places her hand on the trunk. This is where I once made a vow, she says. You recognize the rhythm in her voice now, ritual words. Not for performance, but for remembrance. I said I would never yield. She continues. Never love, never bend. She turns to you, and I kept that vow until I didn't. Mainstream fact. The oldest known shrine to Artemis is in the Peloponnesus at a site where a lightning-struck tree once stood. Priests claimed the goddess made her first vow of virginity there, but some cults quietly taught that she returned centuries later and broke that vow with silence instead of words. Thaleia steps closer to the tree, reaches out, then hesitates. May I? She asks. Artemis nods. Thaleia lays her hand on the bark, and something unseen ripples across the clearing. A shift in light, a soft inhale from the earth, a pause in the birdsong. Then Thaleia does something no mortal has done in centuries. She says, "Thank you." The moment holds, no thunder, no divine correction, just a girl speaking to a goddess as if both are allowed to change. Artemis turns and begins to walk again, this time slowly. You keep pace. I've broken rules before, she says. Turned men to stags, punished liars, protected the ones who kept their vows, but never hesitated, you ask. She shakes her head, never until him, and what made him different. She's quiet for a long time, then he didn't plead. You frown, but he begged at the spring. No, she says, he explained. He feared me, yes, but he didn't try to manipulate me. He just told the truth. You nod slowly. Truth is an easy currency with gods. Quirky tidbit. One offshoot, mystery cult in Thrace, believed Artemis chose not to strike based on heartbeats. If yours stayed steady when she appeared, you were spared. Completely unproven, of course, but you can't help wondering if that man's pulse had stayed calm, not from courage, but from acceptance. You return to camp as dusk begins to paint the sky in streaks of rose and brass. The nymphs are preparing for a feast. It's not ritual, it's just joy, a celebration of survival, of quiet mornings, of withheld arrows and new moons. There are wild onions roasting over fire flatbreads, sizzling on stone berries, fermenting in carved gourds. Artemis sits beside Thaleia, accepting a crown of woven rosemary, and mock complaining about looking like a harvest queen. You laugh. Because she does. Because she earned it. Because this goddess, once known only for the sharp release of her bowstring, now knows how to sit and sip something fermented and pretend it doesn't taste like vinegar. You raise your cup to the moment before the arrow. Everyone stares. Thaleia nods slowly. That's kind of beautiful. A few nymphs echo the toast, unsure but curious. Artemis lifts her cup last, to the mercy that never forgets the aim, and just like that it becomes tradition. The night is long and full of firelight, and mismatched songs and laughter that forgets itself. No omens, no prophecies, just a grove of girls and gods, and one mortal spared somewhere out there, walking beneath the same moon. You lie back on the moss and watch the stars blink awake. Above it all, Artemis sits in shadow, smiling at nothing. Because tonight, she doesn't need to defend herself. She already did. And the world kept turning. You wake to the sound of rain again, but this time it's different. Not a drizzle, not a whisper. This is a full symphony. The heavens are drumming on the canopy above the branches, thrumming with the rhythm of something ancient, alive, and gleefully wet. The forest, it seems, is celebrating. You dash from your bed of moss and ferns toward the heart of the camp, where nymphs are dancing barefoot in puddles. Thaleia slides past you, soaked to the knees, laughing so hard she can't stand straight. Her crown of rosemary is crooked petals clinging to her hair like confetti from some divine wedding. In the center of the chaos, standing dry as stone beneath a grove of thick-limbed oaks, is Artemis. She watches them all, arms crossed, expression unreadable, but her eyes gleam with something warm. Not amusement, not pride, something like permission. You walk over, dripping and breathless. Why is it always raining when you change, you ask. She smirks, because the forest listens better when it's clean. Mainstream fact. In many ancient rural cults, Artemis was associated with storms, not because she caused them, but because her presence was said to provoke the sky into confession. Rainfall marked her passing. Crops blessed with sudden downpours were thought to have been grazed by her shadow. You stand beside her, watching Thaleia leap over a log and immediately fall into a mud hole. She emerges grinning, covered head to toe, declaring herself goddess of swamp. She's different now, Artemis says. She's still Thaleia, you reply. Exactly. You glance up at her. Do you ever wonder what you'd be like without the vow? She doesn't answer immediately. Then I wonder if it was ever mine. That land's heavier than you expected. You sit on a stone near her, wiping rain from your face. She doesn't seem to notice the storm. When I was born, she continues, I was given so many titles: huntress, protector, virgin, avenger, moonlight incarnate. I accepted them, wore them like armor, but armor gets heavy, you say. She nods, and after a while she adds, you forget who you are beneath it. You look out at the grove. Thaleia's now teaching a nymph how to cartwheel through a puddle. It's not going well, but no one seems to care. Do you still want the vow, you ask? She shrugs. Wanting isn't the right word. I carry it, but I no longer serve it. There it is, the shift. Not rejection, not rebellion, redefinition. She steps forward into the rain, finally letting it soak her. Her silver hair clings to her shoulders, and for a moment she looks less like a goddess and more like a woman who has just stopped running from others, from vows, from herself. She closes her eyes and lifts her face to the sky. You follow her into the downpour. The nymphs notice and slow their movements. A circle forms, not formal, not rehearsed, just instinctive. Thaleia joins her mud-slick hands, reaching for yours. Someone begins to hum. No words, just a note that rises like mist and curls around the trees. Artemis opens her eyes. She draws a small blade from her side, not her hunting dagger, but something simpler, ceremonial. You've seen it once before at the altar. You hold your breath. She kneels in the center of the circle and cuts a thin strand from her own cloak. It flutters in the wind, wet and trembling. Then she holds it out. To the old vow, she says, you take it. She cuts another. To the moment I spared him. Thaleia takes that one. Another cut. To the path that bends but does not break. A nymph steps forward, bowing her head as she accepts the thread. One by one, the circle moves and Artemis cuts and rains, soaks every gesture. No fire, no lightning, no celestial witness. Just Artemis, just this quirky tidbit a later. Hellenistic myth claims Artemis once sewed pieces of her old tunic into the sails of ships she favored. No one knows if it's true, but Greek sailors often embroidered moons into their sails just in case she was watching. As the final thread is handed out, Artemis stands soaked and steady. She says nothing, she doesn't need to. The circle disperses. Thaleia returns to your side, holding her thread like a relic. "I'm going to turn this into a necklace," she says. "Of course you are," you grin. You all walk back to camp water, squelching in your boots, laughter rising like fog. Artemis lingers behind. When you glance back, you see her gazing up at the sky, her hand over her heart, where the thread once was, not mourning, not doubting, just remembering. The storm passed in the night. Now the world smells like soaked bark, clean stone, and something faintly sweet like honey, left too long in the sun. Mist clings to the ground as if reluctant to rise, and somewhere overhead the trees still drip lazily, one drop at a time, into puddles that mirror the sky. You find Artemis already awake, because of course you do. She's crouched beside a stream, polishing a flat stone with her sleeve. Nearby, Thaleia is asleep, hugging a moss pillow, and occasionally mumbling something about moon lions. She talks in her sleep, Artemis notes, still polishing. "Last night she scolded me for stealing her goat. Did you? I have never owned a goat," she says deadpan, "but if I had, it would be magnificent." You sit beside her. The stream chuckles quietly over pebbles. She holds up the polished stone. What do you see? It's pale, almost bone-coloured, with a jagged black stripe through the middle. Nothing special. A crack, you guess. She nods. Exactly, and yet... She tilts the stone. Light catches the crack, and suddenly it gleams. Silver, subtle, beautiful. "It's better now," she says. You blink. It's broken. "No," she replies, "it's changed." Mainstream fact. The ancient Greeks practiced a form of sacred repair known as kintsukuroi's conceptual cousin, a philosophy more familiar in Eastern traditions but not absent in Hellenic thought. Some temples displayed cracked statues mended with precious metal, honoring their fractures as marks of reverence, not shame. You lean back against the tree and close your eyes. "I used to think perfection was the point," Artemis says quietly. "Sharpness, precision, unflinching purpose. And now," she sets the stone down gently, "now I think it's about what you carry after something cracks. There's a silence between you, companionable, weighted with unsaid things." Then you hear a splash. You both turn. Thaleia has stumbled into the stream, one sandal floating away, one eye still closed. "Don't worry," she calls. "I'm just baptizing myself in the spirit of confused divinity." Artemis chuckles. "She's a storm. She's your storm, you say?" A faint smile plays on her lips. Maybe she admit. You help Thaleia retrieve her sandal, which she insists now has blessed river wisdom and should probably be mounted on a pedestal. Later that morning, the group gathers for a shared meal, simple fare, roasted roots, boiled greens, and something that might be mushroom stew, but is refusing to confirm. The mood is light, but under it something new pulses. A readiness, a ripple. Everyone feels it. The shift, not an ending but a turning. Artemis stands, and like that the forest stills. "I will be leaving soon," she says. Gasps, whispers. One nymph faints into a fern. She's fine. Probably drama. But not forever, Artemis continues, just long enough to see what grows without me. She turns to Thaleia. You will stay. Thaleia's eyes go wide. Me, you've walked my path, Artemis says. Now it's time to walk yours. She steps forward and places a hand on Thaleia's brow. You are not a goddess, but you are something else. Something the world still needs. Quirky tidbit. In some obscure myths, Artemis occasionally appointed mortal girls as guardians of threshold, places, caves, rivers, crossroads, giving them no divine power, but granting them the memory of divine presence. These girls often disappeared from history, but lived long, whispered lives. You help Thaleia to her feet. She looks dazed, inspired, muddy. What if I mess it up? She whispers. You will mess it up, you reply. That's the point. She nods. Artemis turns to the group. The forest is yours now. Keep it wild. Keep it sacred. And above all, keep it yours. And then without fanfare, without a chariot or a blast of thunder, she walks away. Not into light, not into shadow, just into the trees. One moment she's there, the next she isn't. Everyone waits. The silence is thick, but the sky does not fall. The moon does not crack. The forest simply breathes, and life continues. You look at Thaleia. Well, she grins. I think I'm going to need a better knife. And just like that, the goddess is gone. But the choice remains. The spared man, the altered vow, the silence she left behind. And in that silence, something begins to grow. The forest doesn't mourn her. It doesn't bow its branches or turn the skies grey. No animals stop mid-step. No sacred echoes reverberate from the stones. Because Artemis didn't leave as a vanishing act. She shifted. Like light when you tilt your head. Like the moon when you stop watching. And those who remain begin to reassemble. You wake to Thaleia squinting over a hand-drawn map, muttering about sacred groves, hidden springs, and at least 3 spots where something mystical is probably buried or cursed. She's taken charge in the way only someone with absolutely no idea what they're doing but great enthusiasm can. She left you in charge, you tease. I'm going to regret everything in an hour, she replies. But for now, yes, I am very important. You walk with her through Artemis's now former domain, noting the subtle signs of change, a new path where none existed yesterday. Deer grazing closer to the nymphs than before, a soft hum in the wind that sounds just a bit like laughter. She was right, Thaleia says suddenly, about what that sparing someone is harder than ending them. You have to live with mercy. Mainstream fact Greek justice often leaned toward balance, eye for eye, offense for consequence. Mercy was not weakness, but it was rare because it required the one who spared to become responsible for what came next. In myth, mercy changes the story. In life, it complicates it. You pause near a stream where Artemis once cleansed her arrows. The water glides along unchanged, uncaring, but in its flow you remember a moment, the sound of her voice as she chose silence over vengeance, the ripple it sent. Thaleia is building something now, with logs, twine, bark. A shelter, a shrine. You step closer. It's a bench. I thought maybe people would come here, she says. Sit, think, wonder. She hangs a small sign above it carved with clumsy but determined hands. Here sat a goddess who paused. You blink back something suspiciously sentimental. Will they believe it, you ask? She shrugs. Doesn't matter. It happened. You sit on the bench. The wood creaks but holds. A squirrel climbs up, eyes you, decides you're uninteresting, and leaves. The forest resumes its business. Artemis's nymphs, well now there. Thaleia's nymphs are debating whether or not to paint the shrine. A few want to add flowers. One is arguing that moss is nature's glitter and needs no enhancement. It's a lively counsel. Do you miss her already? Thaleia asks. You don't answer right away. Yes, you say eventually. But not like a loss, more like an echo. She sits beside you, legs swinging off the edge of the bench. She'll be back, won't she? Maybe not here, you say. But somewhere, quirky tidbit Artemis appears in more local myths than almost any other Olympian, showing up in forests, childbirths, moonlit crossroads, and once, famously at a wedding, she wasn't invited to where she may or may not have turned someone into a hedgehog. She never stayed long, but she always left something behind. You think about what she left here, not just memory, not just mercy, but choice. The choice to spare, to wait, to look a law in the face and say, not this time. You rise, brushing moss from your legs. Thaleia is already sketching another sign. You glance over her shoulder. This one says, the moon hesitated and nothing shattered. You grin. Too poetic. I know she smirks. She'd hate it. She'd pretend to hate it. The moon is faint overhead now, a ghost, at midday pale and present. You wonder where Artemis is walking now, through whose woods, past which boundaries. You hope the next mortal she meets is as lucky as the last, because now she knows how not to shoot, and the world, it turns out, is better for it. By now the forest has grown used to its new rhythm. Thaleia rises early, usually barefoot, often muttering plans aloud that shift halfway through execution. The nymphs follow her lead with equal parts confusion and loyalty. A few of them have taken to calling her Little Moon, which she hates and secretly loves. You've stayed longer than intended. But no one seems to mind. This morning you find her trying to repair one of Artemis's old arrow targets, a half-split oak ringed with moss and memory. She's squinting at the grain. Did she always hit the center? She asks. Always? She could have missed. Just once. You know, to give the rest of us hope. You grin. She gave us something better. Thaleia nods slowly. She left. That lands harder than it should. She didn't abandon us, you say. She trusted you. She sighs. Big mistake. But then she draws a deep breath, plants her feet, and looses a makeshift arrow that almost hits the center. The nymphs cheer. One throws a pine cone in celebration. It hits someone in the head. There's a small scuffle. The goddess would be proud. You walk alone after breakfast, just for a while. The path winds through familiar trees, the ones you saw on that first silver night. The olive grove where Artemis was born, the stream where she spared the soldier, the altar where she remembered those she didn't. And then you find it something new, a tree you've never seen before, young, just sapling-sized, but growing fast. Tied to its trunk is a ribbon of silver cloth, Artemis's cloak, or at least a piece of it. There's no note, but you don't need one. She's left something rooted here, a sign, a promise, a seed. You kneel and touch the soil, still damp from yesterday's rain, still humming faintly like the echo of a vow rewritten in silence. Mainstream fact. It was customary in some ancient Greek traditions to plant a tree in honor of a moment when a deity had passed through a mortal's life. The type of tree depended on the lesson: olive for wisdom, laurel for prophecy, cypress for mourning. A tree was not just a marker, it was a living memory. You stay there for a long while, not praying, not thinking, just listening. The wind carries a sound you almost mistake for footsteps, but it's only leaves dancing. You smile, Back at the grove, the nymphs are preparing something, an initiation apparently. Thalea, now crowned with thistle and bark, a very temporary look, she insists, is being doused with what may or may not be sacred river mud. You arrive just in time to catch her mid-speech, and I promise in the spirit of the moon goddess to only sometimes yell at you, and never ever turn you into shrubs unless you really deserve it. The crowd cheers. You catch her eye. She beams at you. Later that night, as the fire crackles and shadows shift around your gathering, Thalea sits beside you and whispers, "Do you think she'll come back?" You tilt your head. "Do you need her to?" She goes quiet then, "No, but I'd like her to see what she left behind." You look around, at the laughter, at the carved signs, at the new rules, not written in marble but woven into habit. She sees you say. A few stars appear, blinking open like sleepy eyes. One in particular flickers brighter than the rest. You pointed out she used to hunt by that one. Thalea nods. Now she pauses under it. Right? You smile. Yes. Now she pauses. Quirky tidbit. There's a forgotten inscription on the back wall of a ruined temple in Boeotia. It reads, "She who spares is not lesser, she is deeper." It's unsigned, undated, and for a long time no one knew who she was. Now perhaps they will. And so the night rolls on. No arrows fly. No laws are broken. No gods descend. Just a group of mortals watching the stars, telling stories about a night when the moon hesitated and everything opened. It's the last night. You don't know how you know, but you do, the way animals sense an eclipse before it darkens the sky, or the way sailors feel storms in their bones before the clouds roll in. Something inside you whispers, this is the final chapter. The grove is quiet, not hushed, not mournful, just still. Like the forest is offering space.
Not a goodbye. Just a gentle step back. You sit by the fire, watching shadows flicker across Thalea's face as she ties knots into a piece of red cord, an old hunter's charm passed down from someone who probably couldn't aim for anything but still believed in protection. Did you ever think she says, without looking up, that we wouldn't need her anymore? You shake your head. We'll always need her, just not in the same way. The nymphs are packing now, gathering herbs, folding sleeping cloths, braiding strands of ivy into loops and tucking them behind ears. Some will stay, some will wander, but none will forget. You wander off before sunrise, not out of habit, but something quieter, a call with no voice. The trees part for you easily now. They know you, accept you, and they lead you to a place you've never been. A pool of water so still it reflects the moon perfectly, even though the real moon is nowhere to be seen. You kneel and peer in. And there she is. Not standing above you, not descending on a cloud, but looking up from the reflection. Artemis, silent, still, present. No words pass, no prophecy blooms in your chest. Just that same deep awareness she is watching. Not from Olympus, not from behind the veil of myth, but from wherever choices linger. She lifts one hand in the water's mirror. So do you. She nods, and then her image fades, rippling outward, until the moon vanishes in rings of light. Mainstream fact. In some moonlit rites held in Arcadia, worshippers would kneel beside pools and whisper into the water, believing Artemis could hear through reflection. They left behind no prayers, only truths. You walk back slowly thinking of what she left behind. Not temples, not laws, but permission. Permission to choose, to hesitate, to rewrite yourself. At the grove, Thalea is lighting the final torch. Not to burn anything,
but to keep the night a little longer. Around her, the nymphs have placed the signs they made in a ring, bark plaques, stone, etchings, scraps of cloth. She paused. She spared. She chose again. You add your own. It's a pebble, plain, but on it you've scratched one word, still. Because stillness, you've learned, isn't the opposite of power. It is power. Quirky tidbit. In rare vase paintings, Artemis is shown seated not mid-hunt, not mid-punishment, but holding a cup, watching birds. Scholars long dismissed these as domestic mislabelings, but one recent theory suggests they marked seasonal festivals where the goddess was intentionally inactive, a sacred rest. And tonight, you rest too. You sit with Thalia and the others as the fire burns low. No one speaks, no one needs to. Above you, the stars are soft, and for a moment, one long, slow moment, you feel her again, not near, not far, just with you, always. Tonight, the fire burns lower than usual, not because it's forgotten, but because it's letting go. The flames crackle gently, casting a golden flicker across faces that have grown familiar. Thalia, barefoot, again tracing circles into the dirt with a twig. The nymph with the gap-toothed smile, who insists on singing lullabies to the moon. The silent one who weaves charms from spider silk and never names them. You sit among them. Not as a visitor anymore. You belong here now. They've made space for you in the way Artemis made space for mercy. Slowly, without needing to explain it. You glance toward the trees. She isn't coming back tonight, you know that. Everyone does, but her absence doesn't ache the way it might have once. It lingers like a scent in a favorite cloak, never overwhelming, just enough to remind you she was. Thalia begins to speak, almost shyly. I think I'm going to build a second altar, she says, next to the spring. A few nymphs nod. What for, you ask? She shrugs. For the ones who almost didn't make it? For the people who were one breath away from being forgotten and then weren't. She says it so softly you almost miss it. It's a beautiful thought. One Artemis might roll her eyes at, one she'd definitely approve of. Mainstream fact. In some late Hellenistic cults, offerings were left not for the gods themselves, but for the mortals. They spared simple tokens left near springs, crossroads, or forest shrines. These were called echo prayers, blessings for those who were never turned to stone, never cursed, never lost. Silent thanks for second chances. Someone brings you a warm drink that tastes like roasted chestnut and cinnamon. You sip it slowly. The night deepens. The stars sharpen. And from somewhere not far but not close, either a lone owl hoots. Thalia smiles. She always sends an owl. Quirky tidbit. In some lesser-known myths, Artemis's owls didn't serve as messengers, but as reminders. They were said to visit those who had stood at the edge of consequence and been pulled back, silent watchers to ensure the lesson was remembered. You close your eyes and listen. To the owl, to the wind. To the last heartbeat of a story that refused to end the way it was supposed to. And when you open them again, the fire has burned low enough to see the stars through the smoke. Above you, the moon hangs in a perfect arc, bright, strong, curved like a bow. You don't speak to her, but you feel her. And maybe, just maybe, she feels you too. You lie back on the moss and let the weight of it all exhale. The story, the choice, the life spared, the vow cracked open like a door, just wide enough to let light through, and the goddess who for one night spared a mortal, and in doing so spared herself. Word, count, Fun 100. Wind down 300 words. Let your breath slow now. There's no more fire to tend, no more arrows to loose, no more paths to choose tonight. The forest is quiet, the moon is steady, and the voices have all softened into hush. Let the sound of your heart beat, slow to match the rhythm of leaves turning in the wind. Let the weight of choices, stories, and starlight ease into your chest and rest there like something remembered, not feared. You've walked with Artemis, seen her hesitate, heard the breath she held between right and law. You stood at the edge of old vows and watched as one was rewritten, not erased, but redrawn in softer ink. Let that memory stay with you gently, because we all hold arrows we may never use. We all have altars we've built around promises made too young. But tonight you can set them down. You can choose stillness, mercy, sleep. And as the forest breathes and the owl calls once more from the shadows, know this, you were spared too. Spared from rushing, from noise, from forgetting how sacred it is simply to pause. So let go now, let the night take you, let the dream come. And when the moon rises next, let it find you already resting beneath it. End of script. Sweet dreams.